Hi, everybody. Are you as obsessed with as I am about this crazy story that's happening near the bottom of the ocean? Everyone's eyes are glued to this story. It's happening in the North Atlantic Ocean. A vessel that was designed to plummet down to the deepest part of the Atlantic to search for the Titanic is missing, and it's actually absolutely terrifying to imagine what's going on down there. I think people have about 40 hours of oxygen left. And David Pogue is a friend of mine. The reason I wanted to talk to David is in November, he did a story. That's this ring light is very reflective, or my glasses. He did a story on Sunday morning, and he actually went into this vessel. So we thought it would be really interesting to talk to him. Dave, it's so bizarre. First of all, hi, thank you for doing this. You're
Hi.
so nice to do it. Dave is the most popular man in media today. You said you've gotten 300 media requests. I'm sure it's even more at this point, Dave. But how strange that you did a very skeptical story about this submarine, or what would you call it?
Submersible. Yeah.
Submersible,
Yeah.
submersible in November, and now this horrible thing has happened, and people are really, really, I think, concerned about the 5 people who are in this vessel. So why don't we start by talking about your story that was on Sunday morning in November, Dave, and what your experiences were, because you even expressed a lot of skepticism that this seemed to be somewhat jerry-rigged, and there was a lot of, as I said, skepticism in this report. So tell us a little bit about it.
The guy who runs this company, Stockton Rush, who designed and built this sub and runs the outfit, is a fan of CBS Sunday Morning, and he invited us to send a crew and a correspondent to join one of his expeditions that, of course, normally costs $250,000 a seat. And we thought it would be a really cool, once-in-a-lifetime story, and it was. What we quickly discovered was that this is not like an airplane ride. Things are not buttoned down like that in this world. And it's not just Oceangate. It's all of these submersibles, like James Cameron's submersible for the Titanic and the Woods Hole submersible. That all of these things are basically prototypes. They're one-offs. So there's no spare, there's no version 1, and then this is version 2. They're one-offs. And so, as you say, a lot of the things on the submersible that we looked over seem sort of improvised.
Yeah.
A little jerry-rigged. We noticed, for example, that Stockton drives this thing with, I kid you not, an Xbox video game controller, wireless, Bluetooth. And he said, why not? They're mass produced, they're debugged, they work great, they're cheap. We've got 3 spares, and they work. And he would show me the lights in the cabin, and he said, these I got off of camperworld.com. And the thrusters on the side are repurposed from some other industry. And you are sealed inside the sub from the outside. There are 18 bolts around the hatch. And they only do 17 of them. They leave the 18th undone because it's up high. And Stockton would say, it doesn't matter. Mathematically, the pressure on that hatch is the same. So don't worry about it. So on the other hand, I have to say, it's a very safety conscious company. Every launch is done like a rocket launch. There are checklists and briefings and inspections and drills. They have this 3-strike rule. So if they find 3 even tiny things wrong, like the label is coming off of a valve, or they need new batteries in the flashlight, if there are 3 things like that, they cancel the dive. So it is a safety conscious company. And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up here, is that the actual tube, it's a carbon fiber cylinder that you're inside, that is not a janky, one-of-a-kind thing. That was designed with NASA and Boeing and the University of Washington and tested to withstand tremendous depths and so on. So the way Stockton put it to me is, look, the lights can go out, the thrusters can fail, you'll still be alive. As long as that capsule remains with good integrity, you will live, and that's what we care about.
So what do you think? Yes, thank you for the background on that. In fact, they canceled your trip to the Titanic, which you ultimately saw. So I think you saw it the third time was a charm, right, Dave?
No, actually, so yeah, my dive was canceled at 37 feet. They had mechanical problems and pulled us back up. And no, that was the end of my Titanic adventure. All I could do for the remaining dives was stay on the ship and sit in the control room and watch the paying customers go.
Oh, so you never actually submerged in the vessel and saw the Titanic. You just saw images of it from the control room?
Right. I did go down in the sub to a shallow depth, but I never did see the Titanic, and now I never will.
Yeah. Well, you know, I know it cost $250,000. There was one woman you interviewed who was a Titaniac, I guess they call them.
Yeah.
It was her third time down. She finally saw it. But what do you think? Well, you know, the whole thing is for obviously huge risk takers, Dave, because as you showed in the piece, you had to basically, they mentioned the word death 3 times, I think, in the agreement. And outsiders have predicted something catastrophic could very well happen to this vessel because it's completely unregulated, right?
Yeah. This sub dives in international waters, so it has never been inspected or regulated or checked by any outside body. And I have to say, we're doing a follow-up story for this Sunday's CBS Sunday Morning, and I think a big part of it is going to have to be just how predictable was this tragedy. There are people coming out of the woodwork now who had contacted Oceangate in 2018, 2019, and said, your approach is unsafe. Nobody has ever made a carbon fiber submersible before, and there's a good reason for it. You are risking lives. Now, Stockton talked about this to us, and he said, yeah, but you know what? Anytime a better way of doing something comes along, there's going to be nitpickers. There's going to be naysayers. People are conservative. You're never going to advance the state of the art unless you experiment and innovate. So it's hard to know where the blame lies, where the truth lies. Was this a safe operation that suffered a catastrophic freak accident, or has it been a ticking time bomb that was doomed from the beginning?
You know, I'm wondering what the chances are that these 5 individuals that are on this vessel will be rescued. Someone told me there was an expert on NPR that predicted a 1% chance of these people being saved, which was so upsetting. I know they have 40 hours of oxygen left. I think everyone is fascinated and appalled by this whole story because everyone kind of imagines what it must be like inside that vessel, which you described as the size of a minivan, basically. The man, Stockton Rush, the CEO of this company who created this vessel, is piloting the submersible. Hamish Harding, a British businessman and explorer, is on board. A British Pakistani businessman named Shahzada Dawood and his son Solomon. He's, I think, 19 years old. And a French maritime expert who has been on over 35 dives to the Titanic. His name is Paul-Henri Nargeolet. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah, they call him PH. He's a fantastic guy. I met and spent 9 intense days with Stockton Rush and PH Nargeolet last summer. And it just crushes me to know that, I mean, I have not at all processed this yet, but you know, to think that they could be gone. I agree that the chances of a rescue are entering miracle territory at this point. You know, I've been doing the math like this. There's only 3 things that could be true. Either they made it to the surface and they're bobbing somewhere, but they don't have power, so they can't tell us that they're there. And to me, that's the only realistic hope of a rescue, is that they're alive and well, but they can't get out, of course, because they're bolted in, and that maybe the Coast Guard will spot that it's a white sub in an ocean full of whitecaps. I mean, probably should have been bright orange. So that's one possibility. And the other two possibilities are both much more grim. One is that it got hooked or pinned on something down at the bottom of the ocean. That's the only explanation of why they couldn't rise, or if the thing actually imploded on the way down. Remember that the facts of the case are they were on their way down to the Titanic. They were about 2/3 of the way down when all communications just went dead. And that includes the automatic ping that it sends out every 15 minutes to say, I'm still here. And it includes the text messages that they exchange with the ship up above. Both of those stopped suddenly. Why would that happen?
And how the Titanic, the wreckage is what, 2.5 miles down, Dave? Is that right?
That's right.
And it seems so, I know we talked about NASA consulting, but they were communicating via text messages from the quote unquote mothership. That seems very dicey to me.
You know, so there's no GPS underwater, and regular radio waves do not travel through water. So you can't like talk to each other. You can't communicate, and the submersible can't navigate on its own. So the system they came up with is Stockton's wife, Wendy, is on the surface ship in the control room. She can see where Stockton and his sub are, and she can see where the pieces of the Titanic are. So she sends them down. It was explained to me it's like a game of Battleship, right? They have a grid, and they say, you know, the wreck is in B7. So turn right and go 100 yards, like that. And they do this with these very short coded text messages that are broadcast through the water with sound waves, because that's the only thing that will travel through the water. So it is not ideal, but it's the only way to communicate through water that deep.
Excuse me, the captain, I guess the Coast Guard captain who's overseeing the rescue effort, is talking about how incredibly complex it is to not only, his name is Captain Jamie Frederick, to not only locate the vessel, David, but to actually, I mean, how do they bring it up once they locate it? I mean, it's unbelievably difficult. And I don't know. I mean, it sounds, I don't know, it's so risky. But again, I guess these people understand full well how risky it is. But I'm thinking about that young 19-year-old boy down there who is, I don't know, I can only imagine what these people are going through and thinking right now, and as well as the rest of the team that's supporting them, right?
Right, and Stockton's wife is up there on the ship, and Stockton's kids. I mean, it's, and you're right about the rescue, by the way. This is sort of the elephant in the room in all this discussion. Even if they find the submersible on the bottom of the seafloor, then what? There is no submersible that can go to that depth that can carry it up. They're sending a robotic craft down there to look for it. It can't pull the thing up. They have no way to haul it up in time before the air runs out. So I don't understand why anybody thinks that this is a search and rescue operation underwater. It's a search operation.
You know what's interesting too? There's been a lot of questions about the millions upon millions of dollars this rescue operation is costing. I think the U.S. Coast Guard is involved. I think several foreign countries. I think Canada is sending ships there. And I guess the question is, you know, when someone like this takes the risk, is it, you know, obviously there's no price put on a human life, but how they're able to, is it justified to spend these millions upon millions of dollars, which I imagine the price tag is going to be to do this operation at all?
And Katie, nobody but you has asked that question. Nobody is thinking about what happens next week when we have to reconcile ourselves with this extreme danger adventure travel movement, which includes going up in the Blue Origin rockets or visiting a live volcano or swimming with sharks. There are people, rich people, who live for this. They are adrenaline junkies. These are the people who sign up for Oceangate's excursions to the Titanic. And they do sign a document, as I did, that lists, it's 8, 9 different ways that you could get killed. So you're right. There's a lot of thought ahead about how okay is this extreme adventure industry.
So I'm looking, this is just an awful story, no matter how you cut it, Dave. And I'm looking forward to your follow-up next week. But is that sort of some of the things you're going to be exploring? Like at what cost? It's interesting because you think there's conversations online about the morality of this and the response to the refugee crisis. And, there's a lot of controversy about the Greek government and what they did to save some of these migrants who were in their waters, and the millions of dollars, as I mentioned, that is being spent on these 5 individuals who basically agreed to face the danger that might befall them, many, many, feet underwater.
Exactly. The chatter online, it gets into really awful stuff. These are rich idiots who deserve to die. There's just terrible stuff. And you said it. The question is, what is the value of a human life? We also know, by the way, that some of this is private efforts, private craft, private donations. So it's not all coming to the taxpayer, but I guess it's the pattern.
I guess the taxpayers are paying for all the rescue efforts for the U.S. Coast Guard, for the Canadian government to donate ships that will be available to them. So those are taxpayer dollars. I don't know. It gets into an interesting ethical conversation about this, and I know these have arisen before with other situations, but all I can think about is these 5 souls in this small vessel, wondering what their fate will be. And I was really distraught to hear that someone at NPR said their chances of saving these people were less than, or 1% or less, or whatever was said. I didn't realize until right before I hopped on this Instagram Live with you, Dave, that how bleak it was.
Yeah, again, I think if they're under the water, I don't even see how it could happen. If they are on the surface, then all our hopes lie with the Coast Guard finding that capsule, that tube, and then rescuing them while they still have air, which, as you say, as of the press conference a few hours ago, was 40 hours. But that number, 4 days of air, that's a theoretical math calculation. It's never been tested. They never put 5 people in there and started the clock and see how many days they'll last, let alone freezing cold people, let alone panicking people. The air goes much faster when you're breathing hard.
You in your piece talked about how nervous you were, and somebody asked, why did you agree to do this story? And did you have second thoughts about it? And in a way, I feel like maybe you were lucky that the mission was aborted and you came up to the surface, because but for the grace of God, go someone like you, Dave Pogue.
100%, 100%. At the time, remember, this outfit has been in business for 3 years, and each summer they go out for 5 week-long expeditions. Each expedition has the potential to visit the Titanic 5 times. So as of the time that I visited, they had been to the Titanic 25 times, 23, something like that. And they'd never had an injury. They'd never had a death. The craft had never broken. So I guess there's this thought in my head, in my rational brain, that says they wouldn't put us on this thing as journalists with a TV camera if there's a risk that it's going to make them look bad, if the whole thing's going to kill somebody. So I think I just trusted the whole outfit, because why would they do it otherwise?
Hey, before we go, Dave, a lot of people are asking, I was just going through the questions about the difference between this and the James Cameron submersible that he used. Is there a difference? You must have studied that as well when you did this piece.
Yeah, my producer, in preparation for the piece, bought me these 3 massive hardbound books about James Cameron's expeditions. James Cameron used these Russian subs called the Mir. They are so worlds away in terms of creature comforts from Stockton Rush's sub. For example, they hold a maximum of 2 people. Stockton's holds 5. They are filled with metal controls and knobs. They look like a massive military operation. Stockton's has 1 button plus the game controller and a touch screen. That's it. It's very clean looking, modern. The lighting is cool. They pump music in. It's designed for looking good, feeling good. It's not, as Stockton said, this is not your father's submersible. And the other thing is that the Russian subs that James Cameron used, like most of these submersibles, have been mothballed. Nobody's going to the Titanic anymore. Literally no one, not even scientists, were going to the Titanic anymore, except for Oceangate. And now I don't think there's an Oceangate anymore.
I was going to ask you, do you think the whole operation, if this ends tragically, will be completely shut down?
I actually think whether it ends tragically or not, I just don't see how he's going to get further customers at $250,000 a person to sign up for this when the entire world is scrutinizing potential safety lapses. Did they do everything the right way? I think it would have a hard time bouncing back.
And maybe this will cause a closer examination of this whole adventure travel industry that you mentioned. I'm such a chicken. I would never do anything like this. I'm too afraid, and I wouldn't take the risk. But a lot of people are willing to do that. And I guess the question is, who's liable if things go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty clear when you sign your life away. You assign no blame to the company. You say, I mean, it just says in essence, we're going to do everything we can. We're going to take every reasonable precaution, and they do. I mean, there's checklists and drills and mandatory meetings twice a day. They do a lot of very safety conscious cultural things. But as we've learned, nothing can prevent an unexpected disaster.
And nothing is foolproof. And it does seem that they cut corners, and that a lot of experts in this kind of vessel seem to say that there were a lot of things about this particular submersible. I don't know why I have trouble saying that. that raised a lot of questions from the get-go.
The New York Times today published a letter from an engineering company from 2018 to Stockton Rush that said, please don't go ahead with this carbon fiber cylinder idea. It's not going to work. You are putting people in danger. So as I say, these things are starting to sneak out into the public eye, doubts that were raised earlier.
Well, I think everybody's going to be waking up tomorrow morning and wondering what the latest is. David, you're so nice to hop on this Instagram live with me. It's great to see you again. I'm sorry it's not under better circumstances, but thank you for kind of sharing your experiences and giving us a little information about this story. I think everybody watching, and I really appreciate it.
Sure thing. Happy to join you. And the less said about our Yahoo days together, the better.
Exactly. That's for another Instagram live. Okay. Dave, thank you.
Take
Bye,
care.
everybody. Thanks so much for
Bye.
watching.